he lost with Nike. He can't really be thought that he would be a likely contender as a sports commentator or anything like that. The Pistorius brand really is burnt, and it would be hard to see how he could come back to any level of the sort of reputation that he enjoyed before this murder.
Now, Oscar Pistorius, the former Olympic runner who murdered his girlfriend Reeva Steenkamp in 2013, has been released on parole. The 37-year-old double amputee left prison after serving more than half his sentence. He's staying in a cottage on a property owned by his uncle with strict conditions. Reeva's mother, June Steenkamp, has said in a statement, "No amount of time served will bring Reeva back. We who remain behind are the ones serving a life sentence." Well, joining me now is the Times' Africa correspondent Jane Flanagan. Good afternoon, Jane.
Good afternoon, Kathy.
Remind us of the details of the case. Just take us back through what happened.
Well, we all remember Oscar Pistorius. He became the first amputee to race against able-bodied athletes at the London Olympics in 2012, but it was only months later that he was arrested for the murder of Reeva Steenkamp, who he shot dead at his home in the early hours of Valentine's Day in 2013. It was a televised trial. He was on trial for murder. And the prosecution case was that they'd had a furious row, an argument, because Reeva Steenkamp had been flirting with another man, and Oscar Pistorius, who had a pistol to hand, shot her in fury as she cowered behind a locked door. It was his version of events that, as a vulnerable person, an amputee, he believed there was an intruder in the bathroom, and he shot out of fear of his life. And it was on those two sides that all the people watching the trial really became judges in their own right. And he's a very divisive character. So there are people who think he is a murderer, and other people who think that he was rather harshly treated at his trial.
And so why was he eligible for parole now? What had to be considered?
Well, South Africa has a restorative justice system, which means that offenders are eligible to be considered for parole if they once they've served more than half of their sentence. And Oscar Pistorius went through the process, which included what's known as a victor-offender dialogue. He had a meeting with Barry Steenkamp, his victim's father, in which he heard from Barry Steenkamp about the impact of Reeva's death on them. And also he had an opportunity to apologise in person for what he'd done. Social workers, the manager of the unit at the prison where he's been held, other members of the prison staff have all offered their perspectives on whether they believe Oscar Pistorius is rehabilitated. Apparently he cooperated with all the programs that were offered to him, and he was asked to sign up for. And in the end, he qualified for parole. He's eligible, and he's left prison today for a cottage on the property of his uncle, where he'll continue to serve his sentence till the end of 2029.
And has this proved really controversial there?
Well, I think it rather depends which side of that story you're on. The people who believe that Oscar was genuinely defending himself. The context is South Africa, which has had very high rates of violent crime. I think there's probably 67 murders a day recorded. People who live with those sort of fears and realism around crime thought it quite likely that Pistorius felt he was under threat and responded appropriately. Other people feel that, serving, I think, 8.5 years in the end for the murder of his girlfriend, Reeva Steenkamp, who was just 29, it doesn't seem long enough at all.
And what do you think his life will look like now? What kind of life will he lead? Well,
the prison authorities are very keen to emphasise that he's still a serving prisoner until the end of 2029. So he's going to be out of the spotlight. That's one of his parole conditions. He can't give media interviews. The correctional services authorities don't allow that for parolees, and especially not for a high-profile one. And Oscar Pistorius being given a platform to give his version of events again, they believe would just be adding insult to injury. And in terms of the Steenkamp family and other victims of gender-based violence, I mean, it doesn't sound like there's much prospect of him getting any of those sponsorship deals. He lost with Nike. He can't really be thought that he would be a likely contender as a sports commentator or anything like that. The Pistorius brand really is burnt, and it would be hard to see how he could come back to any level of the sort of reputation that he enjoyed before this murder.